I remember one morning when Glumdeclitch had set me in my box upon a window, as she usually did in fair days to give me air, for I durst not venture to let the box be hung on the nail out of the window, as we do with cages in England. After I had lifted up one of my sashes, and sat down at my table to eat a piece of sweet cake for my breakfast, above 20 wasps, allured by the smell, came flying into the room, humming louder than the drones of as many bagpipes. Some of them seized my cake and carried it piecemeal away. Others flew about my head and face, confounding me with the noise and putting me in the utmost terror of their stings. However, I had the courage to rise and draw my hanger, and attack them in the air. I dispatched 4 of them, and had the rest got away, but the rest got away, and I presently shut the window. These insects were as large as partridges. I took out their stingers, found them an inch and a half long, and as sharp as needles. I carefully preserved them all, and having since shown them with some other curiosities in several parts of Europe, upon my return to England, I gave 3 of them to Gresham College, and kept the 4th for myself. The king, who, as I had before observed, was a prince of excellent understanding, and would frequently order that I should be brought in my box and set upon the table in his closet. He would then command me to bring one of my chairs out of the box, and sit down within 3 yards' distance upon the top of the cabinet, which brought me almost to a level with his face. In this manner I had several conversations with him. He desired I would give him as exact an account of the government of England as I possibly could, because, as fond as princes commonly are of their own customs, or so he conjectured of other monarchs, by my former discourses, he should be glad to hear of anything that might deserve imitation. He wondered to hear me talk of such chargeable and extensive wars, that certainly we must be a quarrelsome people, or live among very bad neighbors, and that our generals must needs be richer than our kings. He asked what business had we had out of our islands, unless upon the score of trade or treaty, or to defend the coasts with our fleet. Above all, he was amazed to hear me talk of a mercenary standing army in the midst of peace, and among a free people. He said if we were governed by our own consent in the persons of our representatives, he could not imagine of whom we were afraid, or against whom we were to fight, and would hear my opinion whether a private man's house might not better be defended by himself, his children and family, than by half a dozen rascals picked up at a venture in the streets for small wages, who might get an 100 times more by cutting their throats. He was perfectly astonished with the historical account I gave him of our affairs during the last century, protesting it was only a heap of conspiracies, rebellions, murders, massacres, revolutions, banishments, the very worst effects that avarice, faction, hypocrisy, perfidiousness, cruelty, rage, madness, hatred, envy, lust, malice, or ambition could produce. His Majesty in another audience was at the pains to recapitulate the sum of all I had spoken, compared the questions he made with the answers I had given. Then taking me into his hands and stroking me gently, delivered himself in these words, which I shall never forget, nor the manner he spoke them in. My little friend, Grildridge, you have made a most admirable panegyric upon your country. You have clearly proved that ignorance, idleness, and vice are the proper ingredients for qualifying a legislator, that laws are best explained, interpreted, and applied by those whose interests and abilities lie in perverting, confounding, and eluding them. I observe among you some lines of an institution which in its original might have been tolerable, but these half erased, and the rest wholly blurred and blotted by corruption. It doth not appear from all you have said how any one virtue is required towards the procurement of any one station among you, much less that men are ennobled on account of their virtue, that priests are advanced for their piety or learning, soldiers for their conduct or valor, judges for their integrity, senators for the love of their country, or counselors for their wisdom. As for yourself, continued the king, who have spent the greatest part of your life in traveling, I am well disposed to hope you may hitherto have escaped many vices of your country, but by what I have gathered from your own relation, and the answers I have with much pains wringed and extorted from you, I cannot but conclude the bulk of your natives to the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth.